Welcome to Easy Peasy Books, From Author to Authority, the lively and engaging podcast for business professionals who've always believed they have a book in them. I'm your host, Gillian Whitney. Join me as I chat with authors and industry experts from all around the world to explore simple strategies to write, publish, and leverage your business book. Whether you're an entrepreneur, executive, or an employee, this podcast is for you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Easy Peasy Books podcast. Today, I want to talk about a book. Well, actually, I want to talk about what a book can do to you, because I generally believe that the right book, found at the right moment in your life, can change the way you see yourself. It can actually give you permission to feel things you didn't know you were allowed to feel. And it can make you realize that someone else, somewhere else, at some other point in time, was sitting with the exact same questions you're sitting with right now. And sometimes a book can even change the way you think about writing your own book. One book that had a huge impact on me was written by a woman probably most people today don't even know. Her name was Anne Morrow Lindbergh. And by the time I'm finished talking today, I hope you'll look at your own writing in a different light. And so let's get stuck in. I first came across Anne Morrow Lindbergh through her book called A Gift from the Sea. And I want to tell you exactly how I found it, because honestly, I think a lot of you can relate to this. So I stumbled upon this book when I was a relatively new mother. I had a toddler, a new baby, and I had a stepdaughter under 10. And back then, I felt like I was drowning. Not literally, but I felt like I was drowning emotionally. I was exhausted, I was overwhelmed, and I desperately wanted to write. I've always been a writer, and I need to write like other people need to breathe. But there was just never enough time in my life to write. Back then, all I could manage was some journal entries, and I could do some morning pages. But the idea of sitting down to write an actual book was so out of reach. And because I'm an introvert, it means I need a lot of alone time to function. And when I was raising 3 kids, it just meant there was never any alone time. None. Zero. So anyways, one day I was out and about and I picked up this book somewhere. I think we were on vacation, Gift from the Sea. And I honestly can't tell you where I got it. I might have got it from the library, picked it up in a bookstore. I don't know what. But I remember seeing a picture of the shell on the cover and I thought, ooh, that looks nice. And I started reading it and I could not put it down. The book is about a woman who goes away to a cottage on the coast by herself, and every day she walks the beach collecting seashells, and she just takes time to think. And each chapter in the book, and it's nonfiction, is inspired by a different shell that she finds. And she writes about being a mother, being a woman, the need for solitude, the love and the struggle to try and keep everything together when you feel your life is pulling you in so many directions. And I remember reading this book and thinking to myself, oh my goodness, she knows me. She's writing about my life. And I also remember feeling very, very jealous. I thought, what a lucky woman she must be to just be off at a cottage by the sea writing this beautiful book. But here's the thing. I had absolutely no idea who Anne Morrow Lindbergh was. I just thought she was some lady writing this beautiful book, living in a seaside cottage, and I knew she had a gift for being able to write. I had no idea what her real life looked like. And when I found out, well, let's just say the word lucky is not the word that came to mind. But before I get into the details of Anne Morrow's life, I want to share a story that I've been telling for years because I think it's a perfect frame for everything that follows. Okay, so there was an old farmer who had a son, and one day a group of wild horses came running through his farm, and his neighbor said, "Oh my goodness, what a terrible thing. These horses are trampling your land." And the farmer said, maybe good, maybe bad, who knows? Well, his son managed to catch one of the horses, and it turned out to be a gorgeous and beautiful, strong animal. And his neighbor said, "Oh, you're so lucky." And the farmer said, "Maybe good, maybe bad, who knows?" And then the son was riding that horse. He fell off and broke his leg. Again, the neighbors were shaking their head. "Oh, my goodness, those horses are nothing but trouble." The farmer said, "Maybe good, maybe bad, who knows?" And then the next day, the army came to town to conscript all the young men to go fight in the war, and every son in the village was taken except for the farmer's son because he had a broken leg. And the neighbors all said, "You are so fortunate." And the farmer just smiled and said, "Maybe good, maybe bad, who knows?" I love that story because it tells us that every event in our lives is just like a chapter in a book. We don't always know how it's going to fit into the whole story. And we don't know if the thing that feels terrible right now is actually maybe setting us up for something wonderful that's about to come. And we don't know if the thing that feels like pure luck is about to become a huge problem. Well, getting back to Anne Morrow, her life is a perfect illustration of this whole idea of maybe good, maybe bad, who knows? Okay, so Anne Morrow was born in 1926, and she was born to an upper middle class family. Her father was Dwight Morrow, and he was actually a senator, and he was one of the big partners of J.P. Morgan and ended up becoming the U.S. ambassador to Mexico. So she lived a very charmed life, and yet Anne was kind of bookish and quiet and rather shy. But here's where things get interesting. Her father also happened to be the financial advisor to a man by the name of Charles Lindbergh. And if you know American history, you might know that name. Charles Lindbergh was one of the most famous people on the planet at that time. He was an aviator who became the very first person to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean from New York to Paris, and he did it in 33 and a half hours. When he landed in France, over 150,000 people were there storming the field, and he actually received the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Flying Cross, and he became Time Magazine's Man of the Year. And he was the very first one. At 25 years old, Charles was a complete rock star, and he was apparently tall, dark, and handsome. So when Anne Morrow, remember, this quiet, bookish girl, met him through her father, you would just think, what are they doing? But for some reason, Charles took an interest to her and took her for a date, and on their second date, proposed marriage, and off they go. Maybe good, maybe bad, who knows? So the couple gets married. They have this whirlwind life. He teaches her to fly, and she becomes an aviator and actually became the first woman in the United States to receive a glider pilot license. And she became Charles' co-pilot. And together, they became the first people to fly from Africa to South America. And in 1930, the two of them broke a speed record to fly from LA to New York. They did it in 15 hours, while Anne was 7 months pregnant with her first child. Oh my gosh, 7 months. I can't imagine sitting in a prop plane being 7 months pregnant, let alone sitting there for 15 hours. She said the fumes were making her sick, but she never complained, and she had a job to do. She was the radio control person through the whole flight, just her and Charles. So anyways, their first child was born in 1930, and he was born on Anne's 24th birthday. A baby boy. They named him Charles Jr. Like, come on, this is just like the stuff of fairy tales, right? Maybe good, maybe bad, who knows? On March 1st, 1932, their baby was kidnapped. Somebody climbed a ladder up to the nursery window and took the child in the middle of the night. And because they were the most famous couple in America, their tragedy became front page news. The press called it the crime of the century, and they ended up paying a ransom of $70,000. And they were told where to go find their son. But when they went to the place, the baby wasn't there. Eventually, they found the baby, and he was killed on the first night. The kidnapper was eventually caught. He was tried and convicted. But by then, the press had turned their life into a circus. It was a nightmare. Reporters were literally chasing the family everywhere they went. They had to leave the country. They went over to Europe, lived in Europe for a couple of years, and then eventually came back to the States, found some peace, and went on to have 5 more children. Maybe good, maybe bad, who knows? Now, I haven't even gotten to the part that I think actually matters the most, and especially if you're sitting there thinking about writing a book. Anne Morrow Lindbergh was a writer, and she was a dedicated full-time writer. She wasn't a hobbyist, not somebody who just jotted things down on the weekend. She was a serious, dedicated, prolific writer. She wrote lots of books. I think she wrote 13 books in the course of her life. And Gift of the Sea is a book that I stumbled across all those years ago, was actually published in 1955. And I'm telling you, this book is evergreen. When you read it, you have no idea. I thought it was written I knew it was a bestseller because it said bestseller. So I thought it was a brand new book when I was reading it. And here it's been written, years ago. And the amazing thing is that book has sold over 3 million copies and has been translated into 45 languages. So this is a book that has huge, huge lasting success. But here's the part of the story that really broke my heart. In spite of all of Anne's accomplishments, and she won so many awards for her books, she still felt that she did never write enough, that she just didn't write enough. She beat herself up about not producing more. And in one of her diaries that was published after she died, I'm paraphrasing, she wrote something like, "A woman writer is always rowing against the wind and the tide. We cannot easily produce a body of work." And this is a woman who had won National Book Awards several times. She sold millions of copies. She wrote 13 books while she was raising 5 children. She had probably one of the most public tragedies any mother would have to face. And despite all that, she still felt she hadn't done enough. So why am I even telling you this? Because what I want you to know is that voice that lives in our head that tells us we haven't done enough, we haven't written enough, we are not making enough time, we're not ready, or that somebody's already done it better. That voice is not new. That voice has been whispering to writers since time began. So if you hear those voices, just know you're not alone. It happens to all of us. So I want to share this one last thing because I thought it was just actually wonderful. In that in 1939, a man by the name of, I'm hoping I'm going to say it right, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry came to visit Charles and Anne at their home when they were living in Long Island. And you might know that name because he is the author of the beloved children's book, The Little Prince. Now, here's where it's interesting. Charles didn't speak French, and Antoine didn't speak English. So Anne, who was very bookish and very good with languages, she spent the entire day translating back and forth. And apparently, Anne and Antoine really clicked. Real great connection here. Not a romantic one, but more like a meeting of the minds, author to author. And like the Lindberghs, Antoine was also an aviator, which created a whole other level of connection. And during this whole day, he was utterly captivated by Anne and Charles's youngest son, who was a small little boy with golden curly hair. And he was just sitting there playing, and Antoine could not take his eyes off this child. Now, if you've ever read The Little Prince, you'll remember it's a children's story. So there's lots and lots of illustrations, and they show a little boy with golden hair, golden curls. And many people believe that Anne and Charles's son was actually the inspiration for the little boy in that story. So here's what's really weird is that Antoine, after writing the book, went on a flight and never came back. He just disappeared. Nobody knows exactly what happened to him. And it's all kind of spooky because it mirrors the mystery of what happened in the book, The Little Prince itself. So it's kind of like life imitating art. Maybe good, maybe bad, who knows? So here's the funny thing. When I first read The Gift of the Sea, remember I told you how jealous I was of Anne Morrow Lindbergh? Here was this woman off in a little cottage by the sea, walking the beach every day, collecting shells, writing down her thoughts. I wanted that life so bad. Well, fast forward to today. My kids are all grown up. They're all living their own lives. And now it's just me and my husband, empty nest. And you would think that after all that child rearing is done, that my house is quiet now. I'd finally have all the time in the world to write. But that's not quite how it worked out. Today, I'm running my own business, and I find that being an entrepreneur takes a lot of my day. It takes my weekend, too. And life has just such a funny way of making us stay busy no matter what chapter of life we're living in. And I've come to realize something that I really wish I knew a long time ago. You don't find time to write. There is no extra time in our life. We actually have to steal it. We have to get up an hour earlier, or we have to trade that evening TV show for an hour at my desk writing, or I have to block out writing sessions on the calendar the way I'd block out time for meeting a client on Zoom. And I have to treat that time with as much respect because the time to write your book, it's never going to be extra time. Nobody, we've all got that same 24 hours a day. So we have to find that time to do it. And that's exactly what I had to do to write the 6 books I've published in the last 3 years. And I'm currently working on number 7. But here's the part of the story that actually really makes me smile. Today, I now live on the Gulf Coast of Texas. It is a 5-minute drive to the beach. I can go there any time that I want. I can walk there. I can think there. I can sit with my thoughts and watch the water, and I'm free to write. I finally have that very experience that Anne Morrow Lindbergh wrote about in The Gift from the Sea. The book that I read years ago as a young and exhausted mother who thought that kind of life was for other people but would never be for her. Maybe good, maybe bad, who knows? Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you back here next week. Bye-bye for now. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Easy Peasy Books, From Author to Authority. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful if you could leave us a review. It helps other aspiring authors discover our podcast. To learn more about writing, publishing, and leveraging your business book, visit my website at easypeasybooks.com.